since I was working, since I told him I wanted to see it, and he said, let me know anytime.
Suspend on the golfers and the police.
Both of them?
Yeah.
These, which
Well, the ones in resolutions, the amendments.
Where they put this.
That's up.
Good evening. It is 6:30 p.m. Monday, February 5th, 2024. I'm Mayor Chris Martin, calling to order the regular session of the Logansport Common Council. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
BJ Cox. Here. Chris Howard.
Present.
Cameron Austin.
Present.
Haley Zensmaster.
Present.
Scott Feedy.
Present.
Susie Wamsley.
Present.
Dave Morris.
Present.
All right, we'll start with the approval of minutes from the regular session's January 8th meeting.
And I had an amendment to those.
Okay.
On ordinance 2024-01 and resolution 2024-101, and the action should be that they were approved. It's page 9.
Okay. So this one.
Yeah, ordinance 2024-01 and resolution 2024-101.
Councilwoman Zinsmaster's made a motion, correct, to amend.
Yes.
I'd second that.
Any further discussion? Call for question?
Cameron Austin.
Yes.
Scott Feedy.
Yes.
Haley Zensmaster.
Yes.
Chris Howard.
Yes.
BJ Cox.
Yes.
Susie Wamsley.
Yes.
Dave Morris.
Yes.
All right. Now do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the regular session's January 8th, 2024 meeting with the amendments?
Second.
Any further discussion? Call for question?
Dave Morris.
Yes.
Susie Wamsley.
Yes.
Scott Feedy.
Yes.
Haley Zensmaster.
Yes.
Cameron Austin.
Yes.
Chris Howard.
Yes.
BJ Cox.
Yes.
All right. Next, we have a presentation from Malcolm Gerald.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Council members. My name is Malcolm Gerald. I live at 735 Ridge West in the city of Logansport and operate the city's ambient air monitoring station. I operate it a lot better than I do the slides, though. You have the control? So usually start off with a timeline, but I just wanted to take just a minute to give history, especially to the new members of the council. When WSP first built here, they really courted the county commissioners heavily because they needed their help for project financing. And they kind of snubbed the city council. And for that reason, and also because there was a real strong outpouring of community concern over the plant, the this council passed a resolution in 2020 objecting to its construction and asking the county to rezone the agribusiness park to exclude this type of heavy industry. But the plant went ahead anyway, and one of the concessions they made along the way was a promise to construct an air monitoring station within the city limits of Logansport. The city paid for a study that would predict really what would be the optimum place to locate that air monitoring station. But WSP the county had other ideas. Dave Morris and I actually met with WSP. We presented our data and told them we would invite them to put their monitoring station out at the wastewater treatment plant. And they said, no, but if you want to do that, why don't you get your own air monitoring station? And so the city did. Cass County Citizens Coalition paid for the equipment, and we put it out there and began collecting data in September of 2021. So the Wales kiln was constructed a couple of years ago now, and they've just recently gone through a re-permitting period to get some things tweaked since their initial permit was issued. And judging for the number of people that showed up at their public hearing for that, there's still a lot of community interest in what's going on there. Logansport Utilities monitors the drinking water that would, for the consumers of the city. And they also monitor the wastewater sewers so that industry doesn't put pollution that makes its way into the Wabash River. So it really makes only good sense that the city also monitor its air to make sure that it's safe to breathe.
Malcolm, can you just mention to them that WSP does have their own monitor?
They do have their own monitor, and it's located on top of a building over here on High Street. It's 4 miles from their plant. When we did the modeling, it said that the chances of well, there's a lot of houses between where their monitor is and where the plant's located. So we are on the same line according to the prevailing wind, but we're 3 miles, and the modeling showed that most of the lead will fall out within 3 miles of the plant. So the chances of picking it up at the wastewater treatment plant were a lot higher than where they located their monitor. This is what it looks like. It consists really of a it's called a high volume sampler and a weather station. The sampler is the same type that the EPA uses to monitor for lead on its national program, and it's the same type that WSP uses. We operate on the same schedule, which is one every 6 days. And then sometimes with the winds from the south, I'll take additional samples because the wind blows from the southwest about 45% of the time, but not always. So the sampler's been working great. The only problem we had was I had to replace the wind sensor and the cell phone associated with it that we can pick up weather data from a cell phone. Next. So I really just wanted to answer 3 questions for everyone. This is what's on everybody's mind. Is ITEM doing a good job? Is airborne lead increasing? And is WSP safe? And I think we have, at this point, gathered enough data at least to give an informed response to these questions. The ITEM's Office of Air Quality, and most people don't realize it, but it's divided into branches, just like government's divided into branches. And we've been dealing with them really on 2 fronts. There's the permitting branch and the enforcement branch. And their paths don't really even cross that often. For the permitting group, you know, they were the ones that were responsible for the permit modifications. And they did go through a lengthy process. I felt like they did an excellent job in reviewing and considering all the numerous comments and putting on, and having an opportunity for a public hearing on that matter over at McHale Auditorium. But they are confined with that they are really required to approve requests that an applicant makes if it's consistent with the Clean Air Act. So a lot of things that they may like to do would be overstepped on their part. So the changes that were made were more, I would say, administrative, and they didn't really increase at all the amount of emissions that the plant's allowed to make. On the enforcement front, these people, I think, are also doing an excellent job within their mission. They conduct compliance inspections, they address noncompliance, they assess penalties, and if the violations are of a sufficient degree that they're going to fine them, then they'll issue an administrative order. Next slide. So this is a summary of the compliance history, and they've racked up a few citations and administrative orders. They've had 2 fines since startup, and some of the ones that are a little of a concern because I looked at this carefully with respect to how this matches up to the air monitoring program, and they have a common failure is they fail to monitor the inward velocity of air within their buildings, such as the building that receives the electric arc furnace dust or carries the lead. That material is very fluffy and flyaway powder. If it gets out of the building, it gets just carried away by the wind, and anytime that it escapes confinement. So they do have measures to control that, but they haven't really been monitoring that system as well as they should have, and an item is coming down on them. And they had not shown here, but in their quarterly report for last quarter, it happened again. They lost a week's worth of records associated with the monitoring system, the inward velocity on the buildings, and once they get a repetitive trend of noncompliance, then the penalties start climbing. So I would expect to see that. In fact, they also failed their first stack test, and a lot of people that commented on the permit at the public hearing and during the public comment period drew their attention. So why would you want to issue them permit modifications when they're not complying with the permit they have? So this is a response that was in response to comments from the head of the air permitting department, is that item is aware that there are pending enforcement actions since WSP began operation. Item is reviewing this matter and will take appropriate action. And this was just last month. An item enforces and will continue to enforce violations of WSP permit and of all applicable state air regulations. So those enforcement actions are still in development for some noncompliance issues.
Malcolm, do we know what the fine is and when they administer it?
What is that now?
The IDEM, if they do fine them, do we know what that,
The amount?
and when they do that?
Yeah, sometimes it takes a long time. In fact, this issue on the failure of the stack test has taken over a year for the agency to issue an enforcement action for that violation. They issued the first fine was $5,000, and that was for putting in a pollution control device before they had been issued a permit. Mm-hmm. And then the second one was for repetitive failure to monitor buildings.
Okay. On this key question of lead increasing, have you been, I know you probably haven't been to that yet, but if it says highly likely,
On Airgoing, this,
page number 4, yes. So with.
this one?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
If it's highly likely that there's a major lead airborne increasing, is it going to take the IDEM another year to address this, or?
Well, it is still, I mean, even though it has increased, and it's increased 10 times above our original baseline measurement, it still hasn't reached a level that's of regulatory significance.
I see.
In fact, I'll, cut to the chase here in just a minute on another slide.
Sorry if I
When I
jumped
talk
the gun.
about whether whether the plan is safe or not.
Thank you.
So, yeah, it's likely, I mean, there has been no other significant source of lead added to this community. So, the data kind of speaks for itself. The next one, so this is the 2023 actual data. And it does show, I have here a line at the top where it's community level of concern. I'll talk about that just briefly, but that was breached for the first time on October 10th. Now, we haven't seen WSP's data for that date. They've only provided data through
End of September, I believe.
September so far. Yeah, next slide. So we know that there are other sources of lead in the community. We were able to measure that before anything started happening out in Climbers. But what the data now shows is that when the wind blows from Climbers, and this was in just 2023, the concentrations of lead are 56% higher than they were when it was blowing from other directions. There's really no other facility out there that has significant lead emission. Nothing else comes close. Next one. So the second question is WSP safe, and I said it depends on who you ask. When Catherine Kelly was a toxicologist that WSP hired to support their initial permit, and she spoke at several events here, WSP Virtual Town Hall in 2020. And what she said about WSP in this regard, and I quote, "It will be a compatible addition, I'm not going to say safe, to the Cass County community." And there's a lot of health organizations and health specialists that will tell you that there's no safe airborne level for lead. And then regulatory agencies such as IDEM and the EPA, they'll set standards, but they're somewhat compromised with respect to economic development or what available control technologies there are. But they do establish a level by which a company must stay within. Next slide. Yeah. But those regulatory levels change, and it has changed for lead, and it typically, will reduces over time what the regulators allow. And we know that children are a lot more sensitive to the effects of lead than adults. EPA hired an advisory committee of pediatricians and toxicologists. I'm maybe 30 on this committee to make recommendations to EPA about what is going to be a safe level for our most sensitive receptors, children. And they came back with a 0.02 micrograms per cubic meter. And it is exceedingly small, but it's the level that I recommended we identify here as a community level of concern. Even though it hasn't been accepted yet by EPA, they haven't reduced the standard to that level yet. That's what their specialists that they engaged put out there as a safe level.
Can you share with them, Malcolm, what the EPA's level is?
0.15.
Yeah, so it's about
Micrograms.
7 times
Yeah.
greater than,
Right. And that's the one that is sort of the national ambient air standard value. But you can see, even so, and these are monthly averages, that we're still well below the community level of concern, even though we've seen that upward trend. But, and it continues to trend, and we're still dealing with just the first kiln, and they expect to add a second kiln sometime, at least they told Item, they intend to put a second kiln in this first part of 2025. Next. As for, we measure also some other heavy metals that are associated with this type of industrial facility, and the maximum levels that we've detected there are still below the community levels of concern for those metals. So we're still looking at some safety factors with respect to those two. So I would say, yeah, it's for now it's safe. I can answer that. And then this final slide, I wanted to explain the difference between two kinds of emissions. It's a little schematic of the plant there. The first one is called a point source emission, and this is emissions that flow out of a stack. There's a permit level associated with what they can emit through a stack, and there is usually some pollution control devices on those on the processes that flow to those stacks. WSP has 11 stacks currently, and the primary ones have continuous opacity meters on them, so they can get some qualitative sense of whether there's a change in a leak in say a bag filter that would cause a release. And they are required to test those stacks once every 5 years. Fugitive emissions are the other type, and that's a little different. Fugitive emissions they usually arise from a spill, or they are through a car tipping over, real car tipping over, or from a hole in the building, the enclosure, or a door that stays open or doesn't have the right vacuum pulled on the building to keep things from flowing to the outside. Those types of releases are human error type of things. And they do have from a regulatory standpoint, they're not allowed to have any fugitive emissions, any that get past the property line. And the problem is there's no way on that plant to tell if that happens. These are releases that you wouldn't be able to see visually. That would still be very dangerous to health. In fact, the only way to detect whether that's occurred between the city of Logansport and WSP is this air sampler. But we do have the baseline data, and so if that, and that we may have seen a fugitive release on October 10th when we saw that spike. That probably did not come from a stack emission. It probably came from something else. But it's part of our database. It's not something to go scream into Item about yet because it's still under a community level of concern. But that's what we're looking for. So thank you. Thanks for the questions too, Scott. And anyone else have?
Explain to them, Malcolm, what the violation with the stack test was. You talked about there being 11 stacks, and now they have given them a change on that.
The initial permit issued to WSP had a limit for each of those 11 stacks. And when they did their first stack test within 180 days of startup, they had violations of 3 stacks for manganese and I want to say chromium and manganese. So but overall, if you added up all the emissions from all of the stacks, it was still below the facility-wide number. And when they modified the permit, they said, we don't want to measure at the stack level, we want to measure at the facility-wide level. So they try to administratively avoid having a repeat of that failure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Malcolm.
Thank you, Malcolm.
Thank you, Malcolm.
All right, reports from committees, boards, and commissions.
Finance Committee met on January the 24th. There were 5 items on the agenda: Pets RS funding, IRS payment, salary ordinance, flock safety, and the golf fees and handbook. And all of them have moved to tonight's council meeting.
Public Safety had a meeting on January 24th. We discussed the flock safety with the police chief, Yikes, and also discussed moving a new sergeant to making a new sergeant, and then also 2 other patrol promotions. Moved it tonight.
Mr. Mayor, we had a planning and economic development meeting. We discussed rezoning 133 Wheatland Avenue, detention and retention ponds, structural standards, and then we had a discussion on DORA and also on the farmer's market. And we also, before the meeting, we had a tour of the memorial home for the newer members of the council.
Any other reports from committees, boards, and commissions?
On January 24th, we had a Parks Committee meeting, and we discussed the golf club handbook with new fees of 2024, which is moving to tonight's meeting. And we also discussed an update on the Spencer Park Lower Pavilion and the success they're having at the fundraiser for the clubhouse.
Mr. Mayor, on the 24th, we had a Rules Committee meeting where we basically just went through the bylaws of the Common Council to look through, see if there anything needed updated.
All right. Any other? All right. Start with the old business ordinance 2023-38. Councilman Petey.
Ordinance 2023-38, an ordinance of the Common Council of the City of Logansport, Indiana, establishing a downtown designated outdoor refreshment area. Mr. Mayor, I ask for a vote on ordinance 2023-38, please.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Before she starts, I would make a motion. She's going to talk about how it's been amended since the first
Yeah,
reading.
that's what I was gonna.
I'd make a motion to amend. She'll explain that's what we're gonna.
Since the first meeting, the amendments have been changing the addresses basically to include in the Dora area versus the outskirts of the Dora area. And then since then as well, I have heard back from multiple businesses, so I'll kind of go through that, and designated venue, or, yeah, vendor locations. So the designated permittees would be Bonus Pints, 430 East Broadway, Uno Pizza, 516 East Broadway, Renoir, 219 6th Street, La Fiesta, 524 North Street, Black Dog, 116 6th Street, Science Project, 611 North Street, The Avenue, 547 Erie Avenue, Riverview, 27 3rd Street. I did talk to Emilio some. They said they're interested, but didn't want to give a confirmed yes at this time. So I said this can always be amended to add them later as they look into it more. And then for the vendor locations, this would be where special events can be held, where vendors have their temporary license to sell. This would be at the city center parking lot and on your map, you can see Exhibit D. It's kind of light gray. Their I, it's not their whole parking lot, but it's mainly where they have events at. And then Security Federal did their whole area, and then the Historical Society did their parking lot in the back as well. And then I talked to the State Theater and how they're operating, because I asked them originally as a designee permittee. They said they actually they don't have their own liquor license. They actually use the temporary from Emilio's. So I said, well, it might be a good idea to be put under the vendor location then, since different events happen there where there might be other people. And then the Farmers Market, Heritage Park, Urban Park, Little Turtle Waterway area would be the 5. So that's kind of where all of our events are held downtown. So the special events would be pre-approved in that area for the state, and then just have to do the local permitting from there. Originally, it was just Black Dog.
Thanks for all the extra work on
Yep,
that
no
area.
problem.
Dave, you motion to accept,
Amend.
the, what she just said.
All the things I just said, yes.
There you go. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Call for question? BJ Cox,
Yes.
Chris Howard,
Yes.
Cameron Austin,
No.
Haley Zensmaster,
Yes.
Scott Peedy,
Yes.
Susie Wamsley,
Yes.
Dave Morris.
Yes.
Ordinance 2023-38 is amended. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
Any further discussion? Call for question? Dave Morris,
Yes.
Susie Wamsley, Scott Peedy,
Yes.
Haley Zensmaster,
Yes.
Cameron Austin,
No.
Chris Howard,
Yes.
BJ Cox.
Yes.
Ordinance 2023-38 passes on its second reading. Ordinance 2024-01, Councilman Austin.
Ordinance of the Common Council of the City of Logansport, Indiana, amending the appropriations of funds for the purchase of 13 golf carts as outlined in Ordinance 2022-53. Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Any further discussion? Call for question? Dave Morris,
Yes.
Scott Peedy,
Yes.
Chris Howard,
Yes.
Susie Wamsley,
Yes.
Cameron Austin,
Yes.
BJ Cox,
Yes.
Haley
Ordinance,
Zensmaster.
Yes.
Ordinance 2024-01 passes on its second reading. New Business Resolution 2024-103, Councilman Morris.
Resolution of the Common Council of the City of Logansport, Indiana, authorizing the payment of a 2022 Quarter 1 penalty of $6,933.71 for late submission of payroll taxes. Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Any further discussion? Call for question? Susie Wamsley,
Yes.
Haley Zensmaster,
Yes.
Cameron Austin,
Yes.
BJ Cox,
Yes.
Chris Howard,
Yes.
Scott Peedy,
yes.
Dave Morris.
Yes.
Resolution 2024-103 passes. Resolution 2024-104, Councilman Cox.
Resolution 2024-104, a resolution of the Common Council of the City of Logansport, Indiana, approving the appropriation from the NR 298 fund in order to enter into an agreement for the purchase and professional service of flock safety. Mr. Mayor, I ask for recommendation to approve and move forward.
Second.
Second.
Any further discussion? Call for question?
Hold on. I
Oh,
think we might
sorry.
have some public comment here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Bridget Davis. I just have a question. Why a late fee? Who was late in filing?
It was a timing issue. They thought they could file it, I believe, on a Saturday and found out
Was it
that,
their first day?
pardon?
Was it their first day? They didn't know when the filing should be?
Well, like I said, I don't have the exact explanation other than they thought they could file them on Saturdays and they didn't accept filing fees, or they didn't accept tax payments on the weekends. So it fell to Monday, and this was actually something they turned themselves in for when they realized what had happened, rather than wait and possibly pay. It had happened to them 2 quarters in a row. Nothing came they didn't hear anything back the first time they did it, and the second time they found out it was in a violation, so they reached out to the IRS themselves to correct it.
Just curious.
Yep.
Thank you. All right, any further discussion? Call for question.
Scott Petey,
Yes.
Susie Wamsley,
Yes.
BJ Cox,
Yes.
Chris Howard,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Haley Zensmaster,
Yes.
Cameron Austin.
Yes.
Resolution 2024-104 passes. Resolution 2024-105, Councilwoman Zinsmaster.
Resolution 2024-105, a resolution of the Common Council of the City of Logansport, Indiana, allocating funds for the support of Pets R Us, the Cass County Humane Society, and I would ask for a vote on Resolution 2024-105.
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
Just for clarity, this was for October, November, and December of last year.
All right, call for question.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Cameron Austin,
Yes.
Susie Wamsley,
Yes.
Scott Petey,
Yes.
BJ Cox,
Yes.
Chris Howard,
Yes.
Haley Zensmaster.
Yes.
Resolution 2024-105 passes. Ordinance 2024-03, Councilman Howard.
Ordinance 2024-03, an ordinance of the Common Council of the City of Logansport, Indiana, amending salary ordinance 2023-23. Mr. Mayor, I ask for a vote on ordinance 2024-03.
Second.
Second.
Is,
This is,
Wait for him to under discussion,
Any
we'd
further
like to move to suspend the rules and pass this on first reading. And just for clarification on this, we used to do it where we do the first reading, then ask to suspend the rules, and then do the second reading. When we went to some training earlier this year, they told us that we should move to suspend the rules before the first reading to be technically correct, because it says in the code, I believe, Kelly, that you have to have 2 different days if you have 2 readings. So you only have to have the 1 reading after you move to suspend the rules. Is that?
That's what suspension of the rules is about, yeah. And you have to have all of you here.
So you make a motion to suspend the rules?
You have to make a
For that
motion to amend the
Yes.
rules just for
For
this
that
specific
specific-
ordinance.
yeah.
Yes, I make a motion to suspend the rules for ordinance 2024-03.
Second.
Call for question on suspension of rules.
Haley Zensmaster,
Yes.
BJ Cox,
yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Scott Petey,
Yes.
Chris Howard,
Yes.
Susie Wamsley,
Yes.
Cameron Austin.
Yes.
All right, rules are suspended. Do I have a motion to approve? Ordinance
motion.
2024-03.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
On page 4 of this, I'm sorry, Crystal Miller, 2211 North Street. Code Enforcement Administrative Assistant, annual maximum is $538,954.
Here, that is not the correct salary.
That is
There's a bunch of,
definitely not the
there's
Just wanted to make sure.
a bunch of typos in that.
Okay.
I'll get there.
Okay, can I be the administrator?
Right, exactly what I was saying.
We've got a long waiting list on that job right now. Somehow it did not
Oh, here it is.
transfer.
Page 4. Page 4.
We've got traffic managers making $513 as a minimum. Those are supposed to be dollar signs.
Well, that is how it's easier, apparently.
That is, and trust me, that is not the real salary orders. I don't know how that got transposed when it got copied in there, but the proper salary ordinance does not look like that.
So, so now do I have a motion to amend ordinance 2024-03?
What are you amending?
Okay, so on page 4, under code enforcement administrative assistant, it says $538,954. That's not
There's a
correct.
bunch of columns like that. I noticed it.
Should that be corrected?
Yeah, so that's what we're gonna do today, is correct it. Yep. So really, it should say $38,954.
Okay. We're voting on the amendment?
No, I still need a vote on the amendment.
Like I said, the actual salary ordinance is correct. I don't know how that stuff copied over like that. When Tyler put it into the packet, somehow it didn't come out the way it's supposed to be. The only change in the salary ordinance for tonight was the number of sergeants went from 8 to 9.
Okay. So do they still need to amend?
That's the only change.
If that's the only change, then no amendment is needed. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So we've suspended the rules now. Do I have a motion to approve ordinance 2024-03?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Call for question.
Haley Zinsmaster,
Yes.
BJ Cox,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Scott Peedy,
Yes.
Chris Howard,
Yes.
Susie Wamsley,
Yes.
Cameron Austin.
Yes.
All right, ordinance 2024-03 passes. Ordinance 2024-02, Councilwoman Zinsmaster.
Ordinance 2024-02, an ordinance of the Common Council of the City of Logansport, Indiana, establishing a fire prevention division within the Logansport Fire Department to promote fire safety by adopting policies and procedures, creating and confirming emergency powers, and establishing fines and fees to further fire safety for violations of this and other ordinances, as well as Indiana statutes. And I would ask for a vote on ordinance 2024-02.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Call for question.
Haley Zinsmaster,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Cameron Austin,
Yes.
Susie Wamsley,
Yes.
Scott Peedy,
Yes.
BJ Cox,
Yes.
Chris Howard.
Yes.
Ordinance 2024-02 passes on its first reading. Ordinance 2024-04, Councilwoman Wamsley.
Ordinance 2024-04, an ordinance of the Common Council of the City of Logansport, Indiana, amending the bylaws of the Common Council as established in Ordinance 97-1 and amended by Ordinance 01-33 and 2014-04. I move for a vote on Ordinance 2024-04.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Call for question.
Chris Howard,
Yes.
Haley Zinsmaster,
Yes.
BJ Cox,
Yes.
Scott Peedy,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Cameron Austin,
Yes.
Susie Wamsley,
Yes.
Ordinance 2024-04 passes on its first reading. Ordinance 2024-05, Councilman Peedy.
Ordinance 2024-05, an ordinance of the Common Council of the City of Logansport, Indiana, amending the Logansport Fringe zoning ordinance for drainage and erosion control standards. Mr. Mayor, I ask for a vote on ordinance 2024-05, please.
Have a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Call for question.
Cameron Austin,
Yes.
Susie Wamsley,
Yes.
Haley Zinsmaster,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
BJ Cox,
Yes.
Scott Peedy,
Yes.
Chris Howard.
Yes.
Ordinance 2024-05 passes on its first reading. Ordinance 2024-06, Councilman Austin.
2024-06, an ordinance of the Common Council of the City of Logansport, Indiana, amending the Logansport Fringe Zoning Ordinance for structure standards. I ask for a vote on this one.
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
Yes. I would like to have this amended somehow, or just to discuss that real quick. I think that if someone comes into town, they want to build a container home, they should be allowed to give it a shot. We have it here in the thing that says, the last section, section 5, storage containers. Storage containers such as pods, semi-trailers, or tractor trailers should not be permitted inside any district other than the agricultural district. I'm talking about the containers that come on ships. I did a real quick picture thing. I just want to show you a couple. There's seven container homes, businesses in Indiana that's doing this, and these are some I just pulled up. Some are nice, some are way out there, and there's even a couple apartment houses. I think sometimes Logansport's too hard to come in and build and do stuff. And if someone wants to do it, maybe give them a shot.
I think the concern is there's some really cool ways of doing it.
Yes.
But how do you make them do it? That it's not just a container that was bought.
Well, I think they'd have to follow the same standards, put a slab down and the foundation and go from there.
That's the only requirement, so it's not a certain color, material, those type of things, because it's all metal. So that would be the only concern, is it's not that it couldn't look nice, it's that by just allowing it, it could be any container came in and just plopped
You
down.
could always put in the rules and stuff of the ordinance, it's gotta be painted, it's gotta be sided, or however you wanna do it, but it just can't look like it just came off the,
Yeah, I'm just telling you the purpose of why they put that in there is because they didn't just want something.
there's a few more if you, I don't know how that works, yeah. The smallest one at 20 foot is 1,440 square feet. 30s are 2,160, and the 40 footers are 2,880.
What's the actual dimensions of it?
There's multiple different
Yeah.
sizes of containers you can get.
8 foot wide, 9 foot 6 high, and
There's
their
even
length.
smaller ones that you can get.
When you do the square footage, you're only talking about the length and the width. You're not talking about the height, correct?
No, so the single family would be 750 square feet. What he's talking about is the type of material used for homes. So this would just be for the shipping containers. He's saying to remove that and say that you can use shipping containers as home. And I'm saying that's fine, but I think just to remove it without any other stipulations may come into question. The reason why this section came into question is that we've had a lot of people ask that, or sheds, or we've had some discussion of some of the new homes in some of the neighborhoods not fitting the neighborhoods, and so we felt that shipping containers doesn't really fit in the character of Logansport. Not that it couldn't, or that it couldn't be cool in some areas, just that they would have to go through a process of review, basically, to allow it. So if that's something that you want to send back to Plan Commission to discuss more about standards put on shipping containers versus not allowing shipping containers, that would be something that the council would then send back a recommendation to the Plan Commission.
Do you think that we could write something up like what BJ's saying? I mean, I can't argue. I mean, I've seen different, it's kind of like these barn dominiums are the big thing now. And I mean, done right, my gosh, they're beautiful.
I think
Shipping containers could possibly be the same thing, but I understand.
Yeah,
you don't
I think
wanna
the
drive-
question is what do you want to see? Are you wanting it to see it sided? Maybe vinyl siding on a shipping container doesn't make sense. Maybe it's only wood and there's still the percentage they have to meet, how much window frontage, how are they, are we allowing blank walls? I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, so the question would be, out of these pictures, what standards are we putting in place to meet what picture on here? Because I think that's something we need to know, or Plan Commission can put some thoughts together on to determine if we put these standards in place, you could get things such as these.
Let me ask you, if you're building a home, are there certain standards for like your windows and?
Yeah, so we did that last year. We put some stipulations in on materials that you can use, running materials and window percentage. I think we said that 60% could be metal, 40% could be other, which could be stone, brick, cement, siding, wood, those type of things. And of that, 10% had to be fenestration, which is your windows and doors on fronting roads. So they would have to meet that still, but that doesn't mean that it will go together. Just to be honest, that doesn't mean it's going to look like these pictures.
Right, oh,
So, people have their own ideas of what that percentage is and how they're going to make that percentage look.
Yeah, I guess the question was that, would it fall under the same restrictions as me coming to you and saying, I want to build a 1,200 square foot home?
Yes, we can write it to make sure that it states that it has to meet all those material guidelines and the percentages that we put in place. They're different based off different districts, is how we have it written currently. Not specific to containers or what have you, but you can send it back and we can kind of give you an idea of, do we just keep it exactly the same and say shipping containers as long as they meet that is fine? Or, at the end of the day, like you said, that's how we've been regulating or talking to people currently, is saying, it has to be on a permanent foundation, secured, and meet our standards. So if shipping containers aren't a concern for the community, that's fine. I just know that it's been a discussion and Plan Commission felt like removing it versus just putting the stipulations on it. So if the council would rather just see stipulations put on the shipping containers, we can send it back and bring a different recommendation forward.
Is there the possibility, let's say, what is the downtown district, like 8th Street down to the conflict, that you couldn't put one within that?
Yes.
In that area, or?
You can
But
put.
out in the residential, if you met all the standards, you could?
Yeah, so if you look at what we passed last year, it's tabled based off districts. So we could add an additional line in there that they're allowed in specific districts. So let's say that you didn't want it in the R4 district, which a lot of that is right next to downtown neighborhood. You don't feel like it fits that character, we could leave it out of that district. But let's say it's R2, which would be like East End homes, and you felt like that would be appropriate, we could say that it could be allowed in East End homes. So we could specify based off district.
Good to me. I think we should give it a shot.
Send it back and have you guys
That's fine.
work on that part?
Yeah.
I think as long as, they follow the standards and everything, where they have to have so many windows and stuff, and you see a lot of them have either just plain
You think
siding.
these residential districts, I mean, obviously shipping containers, how we have it written currently is that they're not allowed in any district, and including single family. But except for ag, so ag, they could do a single family, currently how it's written. Do you want to let shipping containers also be for commercial purposes?
I think they're already in here, because every year, in July 4th, they always bring them in.
Those are temporary, right?
Yeah, temporary, and they use them for construction offices too, but
Right, which is temporary, so it's not a permanent structure, but would you want commercial something on the east end going in as shipping containers, is my question.
if they could put an apartment like that in there, I think it'd be nice.
That's still residential, I'm saying like
Oh.
commercial, industrial.
I mean, if somebody put some of those together and made some kind of a bar or restaurant or something, I mean,
Okay.
it'd be neat, but
I'm just trying to make sure when I take it back, I have kind of your thoughts on what you're looking for.
Do you see that as increasing business if they could go that route?
I think that there's certain things that you can do. I mean, it's something that I've been looked at as, I know you're saying not in downtown, but we've talked about, and Jan just sent something again the other week about like pop-ups, if you wanted to try to do incubator space where they had pop-up, kind of these things where they can make them look really cool, where you allow a business to go in and try to do a startup incubator. There's some options of that. The concern is that what is too much restriction on it? What is enough restriction on it? Do you not allow it? And then just review each of them that come in? And that was kind of the take the plan commission went on, was we'll just review them as they
Philosophy
come
was if you
in.
brought us the right plan, we would probably give you what's needed.
Right, right. And so that's how they took it. They took it as more of, well, because we're not sure, similar to the retention detention, we're not sure in each scenario what's going to happen or what's appropriate. We would review each one that came in. That doesn't mean that it wouldn't be allowed. It would just be a review of variance from this and saying, is it appropriate? I think that's what the route they went anyway. So if you guys want to specify basically if they meet the single family standards that we have in place and they meet all of the other standards, if it's a shipping container, it's fine. That's fine, we can take that back and discuss that at Plan Commission and bring back some recommendations.
I think we should have commercial and just have that option.
Okay. And so you're thinking all districts, as long as they meet the standards of that district? Okay.
And then also with this one, I don't necessarily agree with the 750 square foot minimum. So it would just be raised a little would be my opinion, but.
What would be a minimum that you're thinking?
I don't know, maybe just like 100 more, 850? Or, sorry,
you mean-
I mean lower.
Lower, 650?
Yeah.
Okay. I know that the discussion started at 600. I mean, I know that there's some efficiency apartments that you see, which is not really single family, but they can go down to like, 500, 550. So, but I can give that back to them and they can discuss it in more detail on that. And then shipping containers, just meeting standards of the district. Okay. Anything else on that one?
I'm good.
Okay. So you would just vote to send it back to Plan Commission?
So vote.
Yeah, that would be your vote, would be to send it back with your
Make a
recommended
motion to
changes.
return it
Yes.
rather
Vote
than,
to send it back to Plan Commission to review the changes.
Bringing that up, would that require a different motion?
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, motion to table, I mean, or send it back.
Motion that we send it back, please.
Second.
Any further discussion? Call for question.
Dave Morris,
yes.
Susie Wamsley,
Yes.
Cameron Austin,
Yes.
Scott Peedy,
Yes.
Haley Zensmaster,
Yes.
Cameron Austin, got on there twice. Chris Howard,
Yes.
Dave Morris.
Ordinance 2024-07, Councilwoman Wamsley.
Ordinance 2024-07, an ordinance of the Common Council of the City of Logansport, Indiana, rezoning property located at 133 West Wheatland Avenue, Logansport, Indiana. I move for a vote on ordinance 2024-07.
Second.
Any further discussion? Call for question.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Haley Zensmaster,
Yes.
BJ Cox,
Yes.
Susie Wamsley,
Yes.
Scott Peedy,
Yes.
Chris Howard,
Yes.
and Cameron Austin.
Yes.
Ordinance 2024-07 passes on its first reading. Ordinance 2024-08, Councilman Howard.
Ordinance 2024-08, an ordinance of the Common Council of the City of Logansport, Indiana, amending ordinance 2022-06 regarding policies, rules, and fees in the Dykeman Park Golfers Handbook. I ask for a vote on ordinance 2024-08, Mr. Mayor.
I would like to make a motion to suspend the rules on ordinance 2024-08.
Second.
Any further discussion? Call for question on suspension of rules for ordinance 2024-08.
Susie Wamsley,
Yes.
BJ Cox,
Yes.
Chris Howard,
Yes.
Cameron Austin,
Yes.
Haley Zinsmaster,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Scott Peet.
Yes.
All right, suspension of rules has passed. Do you have a motion to approve ordinance 2024-08?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Any further discussion? Call for question.
Susie Wamsley,
Yes.
BJ Cox,
Yes.
Chris Howard,
Yes.
Cameron Austin,
Yes.
Haley Zinsmaster,
Yes.
Dave Morris,
Yes.
Scott Peet.
Yes.
Ordinance 2024-08 passes. Do I have any public comment? Anyone in the audience who would like to make a comment, please come to the microphone. State your name and address for us, please.
I've got one.
Oh, notes.
Paul Wellham, 630 South 15th Street. I'm here today. The last couple of weeks, I've been kind of dragged into a rabbit hole of state and other organizations' regulatory requirements and learned a lot of things I didn't know. And I'm here tonight to basically share with you some of the things that I found out. We have some pitfalls possibly facing us regarding the Urban Park project. These are things that were never considered when we did the planning. There are regulatory requirements that we didn't necessarily plan on. And these particular things could wind up with us facing a very large amount of bills that we didn't plan on paying. The Urban Park project, as it currently stands, has been reduced several times. We had a developer backed out. We all did the farmer's market thing last month. And hopefully, the foundation will be able to come up with a good solution. I believe they will. The current issue, though, we have is concerning the Iron Horse Museum and its conversion into public restrooms and the finish work that would happen around it. Department of Natural Resources has been publishing over the last couple of weeks a series on historic depots within the state of Indiana. And I got contacted by someone at DNR asking why our building was not state nominated or federally nominated, and I explained to them that we are locally nominated, but at the time, they were told that because the depot structure didn't originally sit on that site, that it probably would not pass. Regulatory requirements have changed a little bit with the National Trust over the years, and there's a possibility now that it likely would pass, which would open it up to certain revenues and things. But in this process, I got to ask a lot more questions about the site, and I sent them the original local designation that we put forward. At that point, they then asked me about the site itself, where it sits, and I explained to them that there was originally another station that sat there, and it was placed on that site, and then the plan was to create a park around that site. When they looked at the Sanborn maps, which you'll find in your packet, they saw that there were a number of buildings that once sat around that location. They sent to me an article from Indianapolis concerning a project that happened in Indianapolis in 2015. The city of Indianapolis and Metro was going to build a bus transit station downtown. No one thought anything about it. It was a vacant lot. Once the contractor started doing the work, he started finding artifacts. Now, artifacts are kind of hard to explain, but they can be anything over 100 years old, China, whatever it is, but they found a number of things. State law requires all contractors, if they're working on a site, regardless whether it's for a city or a private individual, if they find items, they have to notify the Department of Natural Resources that they found artifacts on the site. DNR comes out, they make an assessment. In some cases, if it's a private individual doing something, it's simply documenting where things are, and DNR has a database of where all these items are at in the state of Indiana. You can go out there and look at about any city, and there'll be a database that shows you where things are at. When that happens, you have to stop work. What happened with the site in Indy was the site originally had a hotel on it. The site we're talking about had 2 hotels on it, and 8 and 10 commercial buildings that included everything from an express station to a transfer station to a stable and certain commercial buildings that were there. All these buildings were built roughly between a period of about 1870 and 1900 or so. There were some things that were repaired after the flood of 1913. In any event, when we demoed those properties years ago, we took the standard practice that all cities took. We tried to save money, we demoed them, we carried off some of it, and the rest of it typically was put into the foundation. They would take the basement and they would fill it with whatever was there that they didn't have to take to the dump. What often happens with these sites is that valuable artifacts and things that tell the state's history are in those sites. The other thing that happens is often these buildings were built at a time of transition. There was a transition from steam heat to other types of heat. Oftentimes they come across environmental things such as oil tanks. One of the hotels actually offered dry cleaning, possibility that we might have another dry cleaning site there. So there are environmental concerns in addition to the historical concerns. We recently approved a contract. Now, when they approved the contract in Indy, it was for like $15 million. Work stopped. It took 6 months to do all the site survey. What happens if they find a piece of pottery here? You're instantly prohibited for 100 foot in any direction from doing any construction. What happened on that site was they found one, and then they went 40 feet away, they found another, then that enlarges the circle again. It wound up the entire site basically became an architectural dig by the time it was done. And it cost the city of Indianapolis $5 million because the city was using state and federal funds for this project. If you were a private individual building a garage on your house and they found stuff that was in your yard you didn't know about, your contractor would turn it into the state, they'd come out, they'd look at it, and then they would decide if they had to just have you tag everything and locate it, or they might decide they have to do some oversight. But this is a very common thing that's happening in municipalities now as we're rebuilding on sites, that we're finding things that are under them, and when we do, there's a great deal of expense that has occurred. Now, we approved recently 2 contracts, one with Dyckman for site clearance, another one with Shepler Construction for the conversion of the building. And there were issues raised on both those fronts. Number one, the depot building itself sits on a site of a former station. It's presumably they dumped a lot of stuff into that. So they don't know what's in there. So in the process of enlarging plumbing, say, we need to bring more water supply, because if you have several bathrooms in that little building, you've got to bring them water supply. That means they have to dig below the building in the foundation, maybe, take out a part of the foundation and dig down. If they find stuff there, and there's a high likelihood they will, then work stops. Similarly, on the site preparation, where they're tearing up concrete and everything, if they come across items, then that whole scenario kicks in of, oh, we found something, we have to move on and on and on. There's also concern that due to the types of businesses that were there, like the blacksmith and some of the other buildings, that there's a high probability of lead contamination of the soil. There may be contamination of the soil of other areas, which means we could be facing some sort of IDEM or EPA cleanup on that site. In the budgets, the things that were approved out of this IEDC monies for the READY grants, we're talking about spending $807,100 to convert the depot and to clear the site and basically plant grass and some trees. There's a high likelihood that this project's going to go way over budget. And this project's being administered through the mayor's office. There's no oversight, except that if this project runs into these types of cost overruns and these delays, it's going to be cost that the council may have to pay. So I'm bringing this to your attention because I think that there are some legitimate questions that council needs to ask about this project, about how the scope of work is, if the scope of work that we approved actually covers some of these contingent items, and also understand the possibility that we could have contamination there. And we deal with contamination all over the city because of all the industry we had. Most of Logansport will test positive for lead. We did run over and did a test on it, and we did see lead on that. We also did, had somebody come out with metal detectors to the site. If you've got a home metal detector, you typically are looking at 6 to 8 inches, and you'll find coins and things like that. And when they went around the site, they found that sort of thing. They found hits for that small type of stuff. When someone brought in a more professional piece of equipment that could go deeper, 12 inches to 18 inches, 20 inches, the entire site lit up with metal at that level. So we know there's stuff down there. And I guess the question we need to ask, is it appropriate to approve these contracts without doing core sampling to determine what's in there? We should have some idea of what's under there before we start digging. And I cannot see that any core sampling has been done. It's a similar situation to what we dealt with over on Riverside. There were things going on that site that we didn't know about, and we didn't know about it because we didn't core sampling. So they had to deal with budget overages there. They had to do more fill. They had to do deeper foundations for the event center. And it wound up adding about $400,000 to the cost of that project, which fortunately was handled through the development corporation and not the city. So I think there's a legitimate concern about how this project could go way over budget and how the city council and the taxpayers could wind up footing the bill. So I just think there's questions that need to be asked, and I would hope that the council might take the time to go to a Board of Works meeting and ask those questions and try to get some answers to these questions, because there's not been any public meetings about this project with every change that's occurred. There was no public hearing other than the Historic Preservation Commission about the demolition of the Salvation Army restrooms. There was a meeting with HPC regarding the boxcar to toilet scheme, which failed because of the expenses and the difficulty in moving those things. Something incidentally we pointed out at that meeting, we were told that we've got experts that have looked at it and said they can do it, and we said, well, fine, it's going to run over budget. So now we're hearing another idea, another project, and it looks like there are legitimate problems here. So I encourage you to go through this information that you have, that I gave you tonight, look it over. If you have any questions, I'm happy to either answer that or put you in touch with the people at DNR or IDEM that we might need to talk to about it. But I think it's a real issue of concern to the community. I think it's a real concern of issue to the taxpayers. And I think we need some real answers about this project before it goes any further. Any questions?
Yeah, I got a question, Paul. Okay, so you said there were a number of questions we should ask, so I'm assuming that you pretty well know what those questions are. You said it's appropriate, to ask ourselves, is it appropriate to proceed without core samples? What else would you say?
Well, I think you're going to have testing of the site for lead, because if they find lead there, they have to go deeper, because it's a park. They've got to go deeper. They've got to put in clean fill on that site, because obviously we don't want our children playing on contaminated things. The biggest problem with that, though, although that's an EPA requirement, as soon as people walk from the contaminated site to the clean site, you're cross-contaminating again. But we need to know what's there. We should probably want to know if there are chemicals on site, if there are old oil tanks on site that were just typically, they're in your basement. A lot of those buildings just had them in the basement. Those could have been sitting there. They could have dumped everything on it. There could be oil contamination on site. But I think we need to know some very basic things about this site before work begins and we get hit with all these problems. I also think we need to ask ourselves about the appropriateness of spending this kind of money on a project that has very little public support. And I think we need to consider other ways to perhaps redirect these funds so that they can benefit, for example, the farmers market. They're looking at a project with Lilly. We could support the project by, say, building a restroom on the south end of Heritage Park behind the fountain. We could spend $250,000 on that, build a restroom there that would service the farmers market, because they're going to have a 2-year period before they can do anything. If they could, for example, have a restroom there, then that would be less money they would have to spend on the project they're doing. They might be able to build a bigger commercial kitchen. They might be able to cover unexpected costs. We could spend money on the museum itself. We could spend money on stabilizing the exterior. We could spend money on a technology grant to recreate the walking tour that we had of the downtown that covered the whole downtown. We could do a walking trail downtown that would cover all these sites with historic markers, an interactive app on your phone that would tell you about these things. It's interesting to note, we did find out that there have been some people who visited the site, the farmers market, or I mean not the farmers market, but the depot in the last few years, last year. 90% of them were from out of town. So that tells you that people are coming here to see this depot. And I think if we just promote it and we let the community invest in making it a better place, I think it's an opportunity. I think it's an asset for the community. I don't see that taking a building built in 1853, the oldest stick structure in the state of Indiana that was used for railroad purposes, and turning it into a public toilet serves the interest of the community, or serves the interest of the council, or serves the broader interest of attracting people to our city. We need to do things that make sense, that are smart, that utilize that money. No one is suggesting that we call the IEDC and say, we don't want that $1 million. I'm just saying I believe if the Board of Works would sit down with the community, stakeholders like the farmers market, downtown business owners, historic people, we could come up with a plan that could be modified and actually work with minimum expense and minimum surprises to the community.
Paul, have you approached the board on possible contamination or cleanup or insurance like that, Board of Works?
Well, I haven't talked to the Board of Works about this. I just found out this week a lot of this information, and I had to verify it by talking to IDEM and EPA. It's a pretty common thing we're seeing now because we tore things down. I know the city had a problem a few years back with the blight abatement program. We hired a contractor to collapse all those houses and clean them up. The contractor backfilled some of those sites with the material, and we wound up having to go back in and clean up that mess. So if we can avoid having to spend a bunch of extra money doing something that we have a reasonable suspicion is going to cost a lot of money, it would be prudent to avoid that and spend the money on something that would make more sense and better benefit the community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Oh, I got one last question for you. When you say you went, you took 2 different kind of metal detectors in there, what, did you hire somebody that came in with this additional?
No, we had a couple people in our Logansport Landmarks group that have them, but I was able to get someone from Indianapolis who is sort of more an archaeological type person, and I was able to get him to come up and go through the site and look, because he had better equipment than what we would have to be able to do it. And that would be something that may be part of the consideration, is to bring, and I would imagine DNR can probably assist with that, is actually bring in someone to do a site survey and try to better assess, because they have ground imaging equipment and everything else that they use on a lot of these sites that are far beyond what we could get. So if we could do ground imaging in advance and know that there are no problems, then you might be able to proceed. But if we find problems, then we can do a better assessment on what it might cost to correct those problems.
Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Jacob, can I ask you a couple questions? I don't want to put you on the spot. If you'd rather not, I won't. have any thoughts on what you've heard? I mean, is there any, I guess one of the questions I have is, you know, because I haven't really been involved, and I don't think any of the council has, in what exactly, like, talk to us a little bit about what Dykeman's, what does it entail that Dykeman's doing? Is he going down to where these things are an issue? Have we done a phase one ever on that area down there to determine if there's any lead? Simple things like that.
Short answer, no. Dykeman is not getting into a scope of work that would get into any of the issues that were brought up tonight. We're not digging down to put a building there. It sounds like more of the problems might come when, you know, either private development comes to that area or when a proposal like, you know, a permanent farmer's market structure comes into play. That's when, you know, those things may come into effect. I've looked at all the old Sanborn maps. I know what's there as well. But when you're going down and taking out a little bit of asphalt and concrete and putting it back with grass, you're not getting into any of those issues.
So, I mean, when Dykeman bid this job, did he have like projections of, according to the terrain, of how far he's got to go down, how much dirt he's got to take out? Is he going down, you think, 6 inches, 2 feet?
I'm not sure exactly on that. Aaron might know a little bit more about, do you know exactly how?
I can't remember, but we have estimates of what it would be, so we can provide that to council.
Yeah, we can get you all the information that Dykeman has and the contracts with us on that. But I think what is important to remember on this project is that, you know, I'm very excited about the possibility of the Community Foundation grant. I really am. But this is something that we already went out and got $1 million of grant funding allocated to us. Out of $30 million for the entire region, our staff worked really hard to go there and haggle and get our plans across the finish line to get funding. And so that's where this came into play and gave us the opportunity to put $1 million into our downtown, utilizing 2 local companies to do the work down there. And I really think that come the next Taste of Cass County and some of the other events that we have down there, the community is going to see a real improvement because of the efforts of some of the people in this room and some of the people that are not in this room.
And I respect what you guys have done. I mean, anytime we can get $1 million, that's a good thing. You know, my only question to you was, I mean, you listened to what I've listened to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to read through this stuff a little bit more afterwards, but you know, I wanted your initial thoughts on this. You know, hopefully Paul's going to supply you with this material also, because, you know, the one point he says that I agree with is, you know, we don't, you know, hindsight's always clear. We do projects, there's always something that's unforeseen, but anything we can mitigate now rather than create a problem is you know.
There's no doubt about that. And I mean, I think the recent example with the event center parking lot is definitely in everybody's mind, but that's a completely different scenario as well. We were digging much deeper and with less information really on what was there. You know, the old maps don't necessarily cover that area to even show you what was there. But I think in this case, we are not doing anything that would cause those issues. Very confident in the contractors that we have in place to do this because we were alerted to, you know, potential issues with the other one with going so deep. You know, there were concerns with that, but because of, you know, the requirements down there, we had to charge ahead anyway. But I'm very confident in this project. I'm confident in Dykeman and Shepler to do this, and I'm excited to, you know, in our downtown.
And lastly, I guess, now I know we got $1 million, we've got 807,000 designated. If you run into minor issues, we can use up to that $1 million.
Yeah. So we're working right now on some kind of value engineering proposals in the opposite way, which is nice to see, you know, what additional we might be able to get done down there, while also holding on to the idea that we need to have a little bit of contingency held back. And getting the project under contract was important for the region. I think the other piece of this that the council needs to understand is that we're really towards the end of the cycle on this first round of ready funding. So any type of changes, we're not going to be able to go back and reinvent the wheel on this one. We have, tweaks that we can make to the project, but other than that, they would most likely take the money. We're not going to be able to go and do some completely different project with this money.
And I understood that. I knew there were deadlines that have to be met and all that, and I appreciate that, but, like I said, I would just ask you to really consider what's in here. I don't know the credibility of any of it.
I've read the article. I know the story about what happened down there. It's just a completely different scenario. We're conflating a lot of different things, and for some of the new council members on here, you heard a lot of scare tactics tonight to make you question things that, you're not comparing apples to apples. You're comparing apples and oranges on these. A grading project for a park is not the same as putting in a transportation hub in downtown Indianapolis. It's just not.
So again, you're just basically looking at more or less peeling off the top and...
Essentially. Now, if you get to, down the road, I know there was some talk about, paring down the project, which is something that you have to do. You go with the grand vision, and we're getting a lot of it, but when we get the infrastructure in place for it, then we can go forward year over year and try to get the final vision of what we really want down there. But when it gets to the point of, doing a farmer's market structure, whether with the community foundation or down the road, then you really do need to look into, how far you have to dig down. Is it a full building? Is it just a pavilion? And, what might be in the way of that, environmentally and, just old foundations, all of those things. If you're getting into, a performance stage down there when you're having to do foundations and things of that nature, that's where you might find some more difficulty. But at this phase of the project, it's not a concern.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate it, Jim.
Yeah. Does anybody else have anything?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
If we do uncover some type of contamination with the DNR or EPA, or anybody can come in, stop work, and then open up fines for cleanup or major cost?
No, I manage our environmental grant programs. I deal with IDEM and the EPA just about every day. That's not how these processes work. And really, the mitigation of environmental issues a lot of times take this form anyway, where it's turned into a park space where fill is brought in over the top. So it's not a concern. I believe I'd have to go back and look. I believe that we did some phase ones on the Salvation Army lots that we acquired down there. That gave us a little bit of a feel. But, there are concerns. I don't disagree. There are concerns, in some of the areas, especially on the current farmer's market lot where, the old Sanborn map shows what says is Chinese laundry. Which makes you think that there might be some things on that, but it's a completely different area than what we're talking about. And you're not really going to get into those issues until you're going down, because as far as the EPA and IDEM are concerned, if you put whatever layer of topsoil and grass over it, I think it's a foot or 2 feet or whatever it is, you put that layer over it, that's mitigation as far as they're concerned, or pavement as it stands right now.
And I'm assuming that Dykeman, excuse me, Susan, I'm assuming that Dykeman and Shep, those guys going to do the work, are versed in this and know what to look for.
I'm sure that Dykeman has dealt with this a lot. I'd be surprised if they're too worried about it on this project, just because of, really, it's a relatively low scope for them, and we're not really digging down very far.
Thank you.
So basically, even if you do come across a problem where there's lead, and let's just say that happens, you're saying it's just not that big of a deal to just, dig it up and, you only have to dig so far, and then to be able to put the cover on it, like 1 foot or 2 feet, whatever you're talking about, you're planning on doing that anyway. Right?
Yeah, essentially. And there are a lot of different methods for, and once again, we're not getting down to a point where we have to deal with it, but let's say down the road, we are looking at putting a structure, on the farmer's market lot, whether it's, through the community foundation grant or private development or whatever it is. and you run into environmental issues, there are ways that you can recover on old insurance policies like we saw with Williborg project, and just a bunch of different tactics to recoup any costs that we would extend. But once again, on this project, it's highly, highly unlikely.
Yeah, you just don't foresee any of this being a problem, do you?
Not on this phase of the project. Now, as we get further into it, and hopefully at some point we can find the funding to do some element of stage or some of the other features that we want to do down there, then you'll want to look into it a little more. But I still don't see much of a problem. If you're getting into building an apartment building there, and people are going to be living on the site, and you have to dig down deeper for foundations to get multiple stories, that's when you're going to run into these issues. Not really on even one-story things typically aren't going to be too bad on these sites. And we have really good environmental consultants that we work with basically on every property acquisition. I think the property that was purchased from the Mike Anderson Group or Bill Thompson was had a phase 1 and things like that done on it. So we're pretty well covered in that area.
Can you tell me, just for my sake, when we do a phase 1, I know they do borings. How deep do they typically go?
Not on a phase 1. Phase 1 is typically just like historical use. So what a phase 1 will tell you is that there used to be this type of industry on it over the course of however many years, and this type of industry is associated with this level of contamination, and so they'll say, maybe you will want to do a phase 2 environmental. So that phase 1 is just kind of the history of it, saying, this is what it was used for in the past, this is what would be common, and it confirms that, like the prospective purchaser, so if the city were going to purchase property, that phase 1 would confirm that we hold no liability on any of this contamination that might be found there. And then if a phase 1 would show that maybe it would be likely that there's petroleum contamination or something like that, then they'll say, we recommend a phase 2 to further investigate it. And that's when you get into some more of the supplemental sampling.
Did they look at the history at all down there, Jacob? Did you have BCA look at that at all? Or do we know, I guess, simpler than that, like that's grass now and we've been using it. We had a pavilion there and people were in and out of it constantly when we had events. I don't know how long that's been like that. I'm going to assume since probably around the 70s. Was there any idea then, is there any history to show that when they removed those buildings, did they even do contamination stuff any type of environmental research back then?
It'd be unlikely to have that information, not to say that it wouldn't exist somewhere, but for that time, what you do have are some of the old, if it's photographs or maps that show what the use was, and then they know if it was a sporting goods store, they're probably not going to be too worried about it. If it was a laundromat, you might be a little bit more worried about it, or some of the other, something like that. And you can find that on the old maps, early 1900 stuff, and then as well as pictures, overhead kind of images, and just general knowledge. So they'll send around like a questionnaire to the property owner. So if the property owner knows what it was before they bought it, or they'll be able to say what their use was of it, what it was before they bought it, and so on. And they'll look through basically every publicly available record on that as well. That's basically what you're paying for, is the research behind it.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Anybody have anything else?
You're not focused on it, but there was mention of the National Registry, and with the Signal Bridge, we did try to apply for a grant, and one of the steps in it is to figure out whether or not it can be on the National Registry. And so they did have from the Preservation and Archaeologists, and some state organization came down and looked at it, and they said that they could not put it on the National Registry because it's not in the location that it was built. So I'm not saying the depot would be the same, but we just did it this past year for the Signal Bridge, and they wouldn't put it on the National Registry because we were trying to get some funding for it. So just as a side note.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
4 of the current registered depot type buildings that the state DNR has in their inventory have been relocated that are on the state list. And I can get you that list and if you want the background of the nominations and everything too.
So I just wanted to dive in on grants. I think the community, maybe there isn't enough education out there for the community to understand. When you apply for a grant, you apply for a specific project for that grant. If you do not complete that project within a certain amount of time, or you do not complete that project at all, that money goes back. And if we've already spent that money on something like this project, and we don't get it completed, we owe that money back. So we have a certain amount of time to get this project done. Ready 2.0 is a different story, but right now we have a project we have to get finished, clearly, right? So things are going to happen. If they happen, we address it. But right now, we are out of time. There is no going back. This is it. Either we give them the $1 million back, or we continue with the Urban Park project. Simply put. I mean, it's, and then obviously I will consider you guys to let me know, what do you want to do, but I'm just letting you know we are out of time. We cannot dive from the Urban Park project to another project with this $1 million. It is strictly just for the Urban Park project. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody on the council was clear on that, as well as the public. So this idea of stopping it, not happening, just so you know. Go ahead, Crystal.
Thanks. Do I need to say my name and address again? Is it?
No, you're good. We already.
So 2211 North Street. To that point, Mr. Mayor, I want to say this in the kindest way that I can say it. I feel as though, as a spectator, I understand the grants. I understand that you're saying we have $1 million and we have to use it within the scope in which it was meant for. I don't feel that we should just push through on a project if there's just to use the money, if it's not fully thought out, if it's not supported by the community, if it's not something that makes sense, and risk having to pay back the $800,000 because we didn't get the project finished in time. Mm-hmm. So from what I've heard in the community, from my peers or my circle of friends, it's not something that we want to see happen, especially at that cost. And what else are we sacrificing by putting public restrooms in this historic building? What else are we potentially losing with that historic structure? So I'm just asking for caution that yes, we do have a certain time and we do have a deadline, but I'm saying just because we have a deadline and just because we have money doesn't mean we have to spend it.
Correct. We can give it back.
We can.
That's the thing. That's where we have to make a decision. But I do want to go in on the community not supporting it, because it fascinates me, because social media has just taken so many things that this administration has done and made it their own, and it's complete white noise. So when it comes down to it, though, Ferris Tribune had their own poll on their own website, and 56% of the community voted to support this project. So we've only seen a handful of people actually come up and say they don't support the project. I don't count social media as a vote.
But how many people are here sitting in this position, in this chair right now, telling you, hey, I want to have bathrooms in the depot?
There's only 2 of you tonight that have opposed it, you and Paul.
But
I've heard no one else.
I haven't heard anyone support it either.
Right, but I've not heard anybody deny it either.
But that's what I'm saying. So like, if the people are coming to you saying, hey, we don't want this, but the people who are in a poll aren't here,
exactly.
That's all I'm saying.
On the original project, not the current project as it sits now. And if you'd like me to read several hundred signatures of Logansport people opposed to this, we could spend an hour and a half, and I can get up here and read this to you. If you don't think there's opposition, look at this list, page after page after page. We've got 23 letters from local business people. We have letters from people who donated to the Iron Horse Museum, and we can take all this to IEDC, and that's the ultimate goal. let them know they're funding a project that is not supported by the citizens of this city. If you've got several hundred signatures of people who approve this project, please produce them. I have some here of people who are opposed to it. And I'm happy to provide you a copy of the letter and everything else. Once we give this stuff to IEDC, you'll get a chance to review it. Because that's our next step, to have to go to IEDC and say, the community does not support this project as it currently sits. There may have been public support when it was first introduced, when it involved housing, when it involved all these pretty little things we were going to do. But in the current form it's in today, the public does not support it. And as mayor, you're elected to support the community. Sometimes that means saying, okay, maybe this isn't the best idea. Maybe there's something we can do in the urban park context, like build a bathroom over here behind the fountain, maybe create a trail that will go by the farmer's market. Maybe we can do something with lighting, maybe we can create things that will close off the streets for festivals and events like Muncie has. But there are numerous opportunities to take that money, utilize it in a way that will meet the parameters of the grant application you have for IDC. And you've already modified it several times, just as Lexington Village made modifications to their grant. You don't have to start breaking ground till the end of the year, as I understand it. That's what you told Dave Morris at a meeting last year, that we didn't have to do anything until the end of the year, but we had to start on it by end of 2024. Has that changed?
Nothing has changed.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Crystal. And you were nice, just so you know. Any other public comments?
Wasn't gonna make it, but I'm just curious. The committee here
Sir, can you
eliminated my
state
Jim
your name?
Kahn, 913 Plum Street. You guys eliminated my job January the 2nd as a crossing guard with no notification, not even 30 days. Now, all I did was take care of the buses coming in and out. What I would like you to do, at least put some yellow caution lights up there when they leave. I mean, I watch as the traffic go through, 50% of the people do not go by the speed limit. I don't know how many times I had to sidestep cars, even when I'm stopping them for the buses to come out, because they're looking at their GPS, because down there at the water main, everybody had to take GPS new coordinates. They're looking at their GPSs. They don't even see the sign. We got a school marked on the sidewalk, but these people don't even look at that in the wintertime. So all I ask is where the 20-mile-an-hour signs are, put some yellow flashing lights, and all they have to do is go off on a certain, a half an hour, 45 minutes, while the buses are coming out. That's all I'm asking you. I wish you'd gave me a notification. I don't know if the Labor Relation Board has anything to do with it. I spent 7 years as a crossing guard, had seniority over most of the people there, but you didn't give one thought. Thank you very much for eliminating my job, but at least put a damn yellow crossing light up for me, will you? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? All right, council member comments?
Oh, I did want to say, I forgot to bring my top hat and my, and actually I don't own either one, but I'm working on it, because if I'm going to be the ringmaster or whatever it was I saw on social media, I'm going to live the part. Amen.
It is Carl's birthday. He would be 82 today.
There you go, and it's Carl's birthday.
Happy heavenly birthday, Carl.
Yes, exactly. All right, any other council member comments? All right, miscellaneous business and any matters not already considered, including ADA Section 504 compliance or concerns. All right, seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Call for question.
BJ Cox,
Yes.
Chris Howard,
Yes.
Cameron Austin,
Yes.
Haley Zinsmaster,
Yes.
Scott Beatty,
Yes.
Susie Wamsley,
Yes.
Dave Morris.
Yes.
You're adjourned. Have a great day.